The Midlands Today Show with Will Faulkner.
Midlands 103.
Well, there you have it. The theme to The Sky at Night, a show synonymous with Patrick Moore, who was born in Middlesex in 1923. He served in Bomber Command during the Second World War, but was otherwise immersed throughout his life in astronomy. He worked as a director of the Armagh Planetarium between 1965 and 1968, and was also involved in Burr. He had a role in the committee to restore the Leviathan telescope once upon a time. Now, Seanie Morris joins us from the Midlands Astronomy Club in Tullamore to talk about the passing of Patrick Moore. Seanie, thanks very much for taking our call this morning.
Thank you very much for having me, Will.
What did Patrick Moore mean to you, Seanie?
I did get a chance to meet him on a couple of occasions through the years, and as an astronomer, you think that, astronomy isn't like a sexy hobby kind of thing, like the way other kids might have different things. Astronomy is always a nerd topic, but Patrick Moore always kind of made astronomy become very, very popular. That's what kind of made it for us. He would, with the Sky at Night programme on once a month, continuous since 1957, he brought astronomy to homes, to schools, to people who otherwise didn't know ways to learn more about it. Libraries back in the 50s and 60s would not have held a lot of books about astronomy. So his popularisation of the subject just meant that for people like me, it was something to look up to, a source of information, and it was just nice to have a guy like him doing that.
And in a way, it's a formula that shouldn't have worked, because here you had this very well-heeled English gentleman, slightly eccentric, in fact, maybe even more than slightly, wearing his monocle. And whatever about back in the 1950s, in the present day, you would have thought it wouldn't resonate with audiences, but it did. Why, do you think?
I actually don't know how to answer that, Will. It's a funny answer. But I suppose if you ever did see an episode of The Sky at Night, the way he was able to popularise this in such an easy-to-understand way. And the guy, he didn't read from cue cards. It was all in his head. He authored so many books. He was an expert on the subject. And with that, I suppose people just looked up to him and were able to, in a way, not necessarily empathise, but were able to relate to what it is that he was able to portray.
And was he as captivating in person as he was on the television?
Oh, he was. I mean, to meet the guy when you see him for the very first time, I think I was 14 when I first met him back in the 90s, and he was a giant of a man. This guy, he was big, he was rotund, but he was tall, he always wore a suit, and he did have the monocle as well, often, when he was out in public too. It was part of his persona. But what was very striking about the man is his humility. He was very, very humble. People looked up to him, and he granted every request. Patrick, can I have your picture? Patrick, can I have an autograph? Can you sign my book? All this kind of thing. He never failed. It's not like he liked the limelight. He was there to help and to popularise astronomy in such a way that you could do nothing but stand in awe of the man.
So he would have contributed in some way to your existing interest in astronomy and those of your colleagues in the Midlands Astronomy Club?
Big time. We had, when you were mentioned about the Leviathan restoration, which began back in the mid-80s, members of Tullamore Astronomical Society, as we were known back then, were fortunate to meet him and greet him. We presented him with a bottle of Irish whiskey, Irish Mist, and we were there with, I wasn't there myself, but there are photographs of members with the giant tube. This tube was 6 foot in diameter, approximately 50 feet long, I think it is, being brought in by truck. Patrick Moore guiding the process, kind of creating the inaugural speech, if it were, on the day, all off the cuff. And from there, you just kind of get a sense that the club has that history. There's a connection with Patrick that will, long stand into our history into the future.
How instrumental was he in restoring the Leviathan to what it is today?
Well, I suppose, in astronomical terms, he is our rock star, if you like. So his pulling power was trying to get institutions on board, universities, private firms to donate. It was obviously a great waste to have behind such a project, and it worked. It was restored, and it worked for a time. And he even was trying to get another project whereby it was believed that there was a second giant telescope on the grounds somewhere in Birr Castle, and was going to try and initiate a program to try and search for that, but that didn't get off the ground yet.
If he was number one as an ambassador for astronomy, is there a number two to replace him, or is there now a huge void left behind?
Yeah, this is kind of the conundrum now, considering The Sky at Night has the record continuous running television show in history. In recent years, Chris Lintott, another amateur astronomer who is a professional also in his field, was a co-presenter since Patrick Moore became sick 3 years ago with food poisoning. But I suppose he would be a worthy choice. He would be an obvious choice. He's presented many of the programs. In terms of stature, maybe Brian May of Queen. He could also fit in the bill.
They were quite friendly, apparently, weren't they?
Pardon?
They were friendly, apparently.
They were. They often met at London Astrofest at the opening addresses and things like that. They would have been the keynote speakers and that at some of the London Astrofest over recent years. Brian May, of course, getting his honorary degree in astrophysics and astronomy recently. So, he could also share the limelight in a way.
Patrick Moore has an asteroid named after him, apparently 2602 Moore, discovered in 1982 by an astronomer in Arizona. I'm wondering, and I'm picking your brain, and I suppose we're into guesswork here, but how might his passing be marked fittingly, given his connection to astronomy?
That would be very, very tough. I mean, I think he's got some departments and universities named after him. He has an asteroid named after him. Maybe I think there's a crater on the moon named after him. If not, then that would also be another fitting tribute to him.
He was responsible for many of the early maps of the moon. Even NASA relied on them before satellite imagery.
That's right. He paid a lot of attention to detail when using his telescope, and this was something that was a credit to him when he was doing the Sky at Night series as well, because all of this was relating to how an amateur can make such positive influence on the hobby of astronomy in such easy ways, and that is a way that NASA picked up on his work and used it.
Well, no doubt. He inspired a generation, in fact, not just one, but many generations of amateur astronomers, you among them. So, Seanie Morris, thank you very much for taking our call this morning.
Thank you very much, Will.
Seanie Morris with us from the Midlands Astronomy Club.